The Silver Spire office complex was dying down as darkness fell. Its glass walls, which had reflected the rushing people during the day, were now black mirrors, copying the emptiness. Linda Barlow was the last one left, as she often had in recent months. 10 years at this firm had taught her two things. Deadlines were more important than sleep, and the silence of an empty office could be louder than a scream. She was finishing a report when the fluorescent lights began to flicker. A hum like the buzzing of a giant fly filled the space. Linda winced, but did not tear herself away from the screen. Just half an hour, she mentally promised herself, rubbing her temples. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and dust soaking into the carpet. A shadow flickered behind the glass partition. She looked up, but the room was empty. Just rows of desks covered in the blue of their monitors, and the motivational quote posters the CEO had ordered hung up after the corporate training. "Success is 99% persistence," the yellow letters above her desk read. Linda grinned. Perseverance had made her indispensable and lonely. The flickering grew louder. One of the lamps went out, releasing a puff of grey smoke. Linda sniffed the air. It smelled like burning insulation. And damp? Strange. The ventilation system here dried the air to a desert state. She closed her laptop, stroking the sleeve of her jacket with her knuckles. Time to go home. But something made her slow down near the CEO's office. The door, always electronically locked, was slightly open. A gap the width of a palm. A dim yellow light was pouring from inside. Linda froze. Mr. Grayson never stayed past 6. Last month, he had fired the cleaning lady for going into his office to get the wastebasket. "Confidential documents," he had muttered, adjusting his tie with the gold scorpion pin. The dampness had increased, mixing with a metallic taste. Copper. Blood. Linda pushed the door. The office was empty, but the desk, usually spotless, was now buried in papers and photographs. She came closer, her heart pounding somewhere in her throat. In the pictures, her. In the morning at the subway, in a black coat and holding a coffee in her hand. In a cafe at lunch. You can even see a piece of avocado salad. In the elevator. Here, Linda fixed a strand of hair. Her reflection in the mirror imprinted her tired face. A cold drop fell on her neck. Linda screamed, raising her head sharply. The ceiling was dry. Footsteps. Somewhere in the hallway. Hard, rhythmic, as if someone's shoes were beating time on the linoleum. She ran out of the office, forgetting about the photographs. At the end of the hallway, a silhouette flashed by, tall in a dark suit with the characteristic stoop of Mr. Grayson. "Mr. Grayson!" Her voice trembled, echoing across the floor. The figure did not turn around. It moved toward the stairs smoothly, as if gliding, not walking. Linda ran, her heels clicking like teeth chattering with fear. The hall with the elevators was empty. Only the glowing call button was blinking red. The air thickened, as if filled with gelatin. The footsteps sounded again, this time from below. She rushed down the stairwell. The concrete steps spiraled downward, merging into a black funnel. Somewhere in the depths of this abyss, footsteps were heard. Linda descended, clutching the railing until her knuckles turned white. After 3 flights, she stopped, listening. The footsteps, too, had fallen silent. "Mr. Grayson," she called in a whisper. The answer was a creak, as if something heavy was being dragged across the concrete. Linda ran down. Footsteps were now following her from above, below to the side. The echo turned the stairs into a trap of sounds. She counted the floors, -2, -3. Basement, but the building only had 2 underground levels. The lights went out. The silence hit her like a bag of sand. No hum of systems, no creaking of elevators. Not even her own breathing. Linda frantically pulled out her phone. The blue screen illuminated her face. 047, no signal. She turned on the flashlight. A beam of light tore a face out of the darkness. No, not a face. Emptiness. A silhouette stood centimeters away from her, a black suit blending into the darkness, but where the face should have been, the light dissipated, like in a black hole. A scream escaped her lips, echoing in a dozen voices. Linda rushed up, stumbling over the steps. Her legs were buckling, but the adrenaline was driving her forward. The door with the sign, Floor 3, appeared in front of her suddenly. She slammed her shoulder into it, flying out into the familiar corridor. Linda did not remember how she got to the car. She woke up already sitting behind the wheel, her fingers gripping the rim so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The clock read 1:23. She did not sleep that night. Her friend's apartment, where Linda rushed, shaking as if in a fever, seemed like an island of safety. But the shadows outside the window were moving. On the wall where the light from the street lamp fell, a black spot was slowly spreading, taking the shape of a person. "It's fatigue," Linda repeated, digging her nails into the pillow. "Hallucinations from overwork." The office was bustling in the morning. Employees crowded around the director's office, where the police found his phone, keys, and glasses in perfect order. Mr. Grayson's disappearance became the main topic. "Linda, you were the last one here yesterday. Did you notice anything strange?" Manager Sarah squinted, studying her pale face. Linda shook her head, staring into her coffee. The liquid trembled, forming tiny waves. 2 weeks later, she handed in her resignation. The box with her personal belongings seemed ridiculously small for 10 years of life. Co-workers whispered behind her back as she walked to the elevator for the last time. But when the elevator doors closed, the mirrored wall reflected more than just her silhouette. Behind, in the corner, stood a dark figure without a face. Epilogue. A new director was found at the Silver Spire. The lamps on the 3rd floor were replaced, and the office now smelled of lemon freshener. But sometimes, when someone stays late, a creaking sound comes from the stairwell, like something heavy being dragged across concrete. Upper.
As tar, Brian, tiredly turning down the radio, peered at the strip of highway illuminated by dim headlights. His shift at the shop had lasted until midnight, and now the road home was 40 kilometers of emptiness, rare signs and abandoned fields. He was already imagining how he would collapse on the bed, but fate had prepared a different scenario. The engine wheezed, jerked, and died. "Oh, come on!" Brian slapped his palm on the steering wheel, as if that could help. The pickup, a faithful steed, gave up in the middle of a remote area. No lights, no cars, only the wind whispering in the dry grass. He got out, slamming the door, and the cold air burned his lungs. The hood squealed, obeying his trembling hands. The phone flashlight snatched the engine from the darkness. Wires, metal, nothing unusual. But Brian froze, feeling someone's presence. "Need help?" The voice sounded right behind him, muffled as if from underground. Brian's heart sank into his heels. Turning around, he saw him, a tall silhouette in a long coat, his face hidden under a cap. A shadow? A hallucination? But the stranger stepped closer, and the flashlight caught pale fingers clenched on the wing of the car. "Give me a ride," he hissed, and Brian, suppressing a tremor, nodded. "Only if we start it." The voice broke into a falsetto. The stranger silently pointed to the hood. Brian, as if hypnotized, obeyed. A hand in a black glove touched the wiring. The engine roared, coming to life. A sorcerer, or what? Brian tried to joke, climbing behind the wheel. The passenger sat down next to him, and the smell of damp earth filled the cabin. The journey continued, but the silence in the cabin became oppressive. "How far are we going?" Brian asked, noticing out of the corner of his eye that the passenger was not breathing. He only shook his head, the shadow of his cap moving deeper over his face. Suddenly, a blinding light burst out from the left. A truck was rushing towards him. Brian screamed, covering his face, and at that moment the passenger seat creaked. "Hey, did you see this psycho?" He turned around, but the cabin was empty. His heart pounded like a hammer. In the rear-view mirror, in the bloody light of the brake lights, he stood, a motionless silhouette, his hands slowly rising in a farewell gesture. And then, he melted. Brian pressed the gas until he entered the communication zone. In the morning, with trembling hands, showing the police the recording from the recorder, he saw. At the moment of the flash of the headlights, the passenger was not in the cabin at all, only a shadow sliding across the glass. Since then, Brian has been avoiding that place for 30 kilometers. Sometimes at night it seems to him that a black cap flashes in the mirror and a whisper, "Give me a ride." P.S. If you hear a knock on the window on an empty road, do not open it, even if the engine has stalled. The rain pounded the roof of the car, as if trying to warn me. The GPS stubbornly showed that Monica's house was 2 kilometers away, but there was nothing around except wet pine trees and fog. I turned on the windshield wipers, nervously tapping my fingers on the steering wheel. Just 2 days ago, we met on a social network, a random like, a couple of jokes, common interests, and now I was driving to her with a bag of snacks and a bottle of wine in the back seat. "My parents left, my brother with them," she wrote. "It will be just us." The house appeared suddenly, tall, wooden, with dark windows. It stood far from the road, surrounded by centuries-old firs, whose branches intertwined into an ominous canopy. The gravel driveway crunched under the wheels. "Hi!" Monica jumped out onto the porch, wrapped in a checkered blanket. Her red hair blended with the autumn leaves. She looked just like in the photo. Freckles, laughing eyes, a slightly hoarse voice. "Come in." She smiled, looking at me with eyes as blue as a lake. The interior was like something out of a catalog. A polka dot sofa, family photos on the walls, the smell of cinnamon. But the air was heavy, as if the house hadn't been aired for a long time. "Tea? Or?" She nodded at the wine. "I'm driving," I answered, pointing to the keys. "And my dog Miley is waiting for me at home." We chatted about trivial things while I quietly studied the room. On the shelf stood a doll with a porcelain face. Her glass eyes followed me. "It's Grandma's." Monica noticed my gaze. She loved antiques. The wind howled in the chimneys, and somewhere upstairs a door slammed. Monica flinched. "Shall we order pizza?" she suggested too quickly. As we were choosing toppings, I heard a dull, like someone punching wood, downstairs. "Are these yours?" I nodded toward the stairs. "No pets," she whispered. Her fingers dug into my sleeve. I picked up a pillow, an absurd weapon, there, and began to descend. Each step creaked like bone. When I reached the kitchen, I turned on the light. Nothing suspicious. A knife on the cutting board, cups in the sink, a bag of snacks. No one. "Everything's fine," I shouted, but my voice shook. At that moment, headlights hit the window. "Pizza!" Monica cried happily, descending the stairs. The delivery man knocked 3 times rhythmically like a crypt door. "Papa Joe's delivery," I said, reaching out for the lock. She grabbed my elbow. "Wait." Her eyes darted around. "Are you sure?" There was a guy in his 20s standing behind the door. His hood covered his face, but I could see his teeth, his smile too wide. $20.40. He held out the box. I turned to hand the pizza to Monica, and a second later I heard her scream behind me. The delivery man took off like an animal unleashed. He ran unnaturally, jerking, barely bending his knees. I gave chase, tripping over the roots. The wind whistled in my ears, branches whipped my face. After 100 meters, I stopped, realizing he was gone. Just like his car, which was not near the house. Returning, I froze on the threshold. The house was empty. Monica? The door creaked on the second floor. I ran into the bedroom. Empty. The mirror in the bathroom was fogged up, as if someone had breathed on it a minute ago. Her phone was lying on the floor. The screen was cracked, as if it had been thrown with all its force. The police arrived quickly. "Young man," the officer chewed gum, "are you sure you looked everywhere? Maybe she hid to play a prank on you." But it sounded very stupid. I even got angry at this version of the policeman. They checked the house with me again. I think we looked everywhere, but did not find any traces. I didn't sleep a wink that night. All correspondence with her and social media accounts suddenly disappeared. No traces, not even digital ones. A week later, the news reported about a girl who had been found, but she didn't match the description at all. I never heard anything about Monica again.